Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
Happy Takeover Tuesday.
Woo-hoo.
Woohoo. All right. So we're just going to get started. Welcome, everyone who's tuning in today. For those of you that are new to Takeover Tuesdays, this is a show that's a platform for connecting community, telling your story, and connecting small business owners and just supporting their businesses. And with everything going on in the last few weeks, I thought that it was really critical that we take some time to stop and talk about these things. Usually we'd have a business owner on one-on-one discussing, but I thought that it just made sense to have a panel discussion because I know I personally have been engaging with a lot of people in the community. They've been asking questions, they've been sharing their stories and testimonials, and people just want to know what to do next, or if they do know what to do next, they just want to discuss this and just share what we've been through and what we've experienced. So that being said, that's why we're doing this panel today. And without further ado, I'm going to take a moment and introduce everybody before we get started. We have Shara Smith, and she's on the top left. Hopefully that's showing in your screen the same way. And Shara is going to share her story. She's in DC, Maryland area in just a minute. We've got Analise Harris. Hi, Analise. Everyone who's watched this show before knows that Analise is the owner of Crows on the Block. She's based here in Denver. And then last, we've got Charles Stanley. And hi, Charles.
Hi.
And Charles is based in Mississippi. So let's just go around the square and give everybody a little bit of information about yourself, where, who you are, what you do, why you're on this platform today. So Shara, let's go ahead and start with you.
Sure. So hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's definitely 12 p.m. here on the East Coast. My name is Shara Smith. I am a training and education specialist. I'm a learning architect for online and in-person learning communities. I am also the owner of a small boutique training company called Gateways to Greatness. You can find out more about what I do on gatewaystogreatness.com. I'm also a speaker, a motivational speaker. I've worked with youth, specifically teen moms, because I was a teen mom myself. I had my oldest daughter when I was 17, so I've done a lot of work in the communities with helping empower young teen moms to continue to fulfill their dreams and their goals despite setback is what I will call it. I'm also Black. I'm a Blackity Black person and a Blackity Black daughter and a Blackity Black niece and friend who support all things Blackity Black. Okay, do you hear me? All right. That being said, I will put a shameless plug in for a new podcast that I'm starting with two friends of mine who are also great community leaders and business owners and entrepreneurs and out here doing their thing with real estate. And it's called The Black Woman Reborn, The Internal Revolution. And we are kicking off this Friday, June 19th or Juneteenth at 6:19 p.m. So all of those things, hopefully that's enough to describe. I'm a mom. I'm a single mom too. So the list goes on.
Thank you, Shara. Let's see. Analise, you want to go next?
Sure. Also, I couldn't find the live to share, but maybe send me the link.
Okay, got it.
Let's see. I'm an educator, that's what I would say. And I just like to sit in that. I'm an educator, so when I know information, other people are definitely going to learn what I've learned. And I also feel like as an educator, it's my obligation to connect people, to not only inform them, but if I know of an opportunity, I definitely like to connect people and be able to help them reach their full potential. And that's why I like to I'm just saying I'm an educator right now. Definitely pretty creative, and during this time have had a lot of opportunities to just sit in my creations and make things virtual. And then I don't like calling myself an activist, but I definitely am engaged in the community as in regards to critical thinking and challenging the status quo. I know my friends from...
I'm going to have you pause there, Analise. Okay, let's see. I hope we're live. I feel like it was preparing. Unfortunately, we may have to start that over. I apologize, you guys. Let's see.
That's why I was like, I was on your page. I didn't see it.
Yeah, I didn't
thank you. I'm glad you said something. So hold on. Sometimes it does that.
Yeah, I know.
It was saying recording, but then it looked like it was spinning preparing.
I still see a recording here, but I don't see it live on Facebook. So and I'm on your Jess page.
Yep. I'm glad you said something. So I'm going to go back here. What I'm going to do is try it again.
Because the people was asking me. They're like, "Oh no!"
Okay, here we go. Tell them it's coming. It's coming. I'm going to reboot here and try again. Hold on. Okay, so it's preparing the live view. So hopefully it actually connects this time.
And Charles, how long have you been growing your locks?
This is year 8.
Wow. Yeah, wow.
But we got a little practice in.
That's random. Let me show that.
Now we can really do it. Okay. So here we go. We are live. Yay. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We thought we were live, but apparently we weren't. So thank you for your patience. Hope you're still with us. This is Takeover Tuesdays. I'm excited to be here. Welcome to my guests. In just a moment, I'm going to introduce each one of them. But if you have never been to a Takeover Tuesday segment, let me share a little bit about what it is. It is a platform for connecting community and business entrepreneurs, and just an opportunity for them to share their story and connect with each other. So with everything going on right now, racism in America, George Floyd, things like that, I just thought it's more important than ever to connect with fellow people in the community across the nation. So each of us is from different places, and just have a conversation about not only what's going on, but our experiences and what we can do next. So I think it's really important to engage in next steps and solutions and how we can shift and make a permanent change in America, because something has to give. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our guest for today. And we have on the top left corner, Shara Smith. Good morning, Shara. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
Good, good. And on the bottom left, we have Charles Stanley. Good morning, Charles.
Everyone.
And on the right, we have Analise Harris. Good morning, Analise. How are you doing this morning?
Hi, I'm good. Well,
good.
Muted.
Yeah. All right. We are going to get started. And first, I want our audience to know who you all are and just a little bit about your background and yourself. So if you could share a little bit of what you think is important for people to know as they watch this segment. So Shara, let's start with you.
Sure. So I am by trade a training and education specialist. So I develop curriculum. I'm a learning architect of both virtual, online, and in-person training and learning communities. I am also a certified coach. I do community coaching as well as part of things that I do around organizing. That's really where a lot of my background is. I started out as an organizer in a community during both Obama campaigns. I worked for the re-election campaign as well as the first election of Obama, and did voter registration drives and voter turnout all around the country. I'm also a Black single mother. I'm also a Black daughter. I'm also a Black niece. I'm also a Black friend who supports all things Blackity Black Black. And that being said, I do want to put in a shameless plug for a podcast that I am developing with two very, very powerful community leaders, activists, entrepreneurs, real estate gurus, friends of mine, just if anything else, friends who I look up to and admire, that we're starting this Friday, Juneteenth at 6:19 p.m. called The Black Woman Reborn, The Internal Revolution. So please join us as we continue to have conversations like these about the issues that affect Black women in particular in our professional and personal lives.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to Analise next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Analise Harris. I'm the founder of Curls on the Block. I'm an educator and currently an adjunct professor for a first-year experience course. I like to say I'm an educator because I enjoy learning and sharing what I know with others. And I also like to connect people with opportunities so they can also reach their full potential. And I just like to go by that for the most part. As people have been asking me, well, what do you do? I'm like, a lot, but educate.
Exactly.
So, curlsontheblock.com. Stay curly.
Thank you for sharing. All right, Charles.
Good afternoon or morning to some. I'm in Mississippi, so it is still morning. My name is Charles Stanley. I am the director of schools for the Mississippi region with Republic Charter Schools, which is a charter school network based out of Nashville, Tennessee, and Jackson, Mississippi. I'm a North Carolina native, originally born and raised there, and then spent my educational career at Vanderbilt University. And from that experience, joined into the classroom. I taught in Nashville, both in public, private, and charter schools for 3 years before relocating to New York City. Lived in New York City and taught an additional 3 more years where I taught a little bit of elementary school and then back to middle school during my last year in the classroom. And then I transitioned after being recruited by Success Academies in New York City to be an assistant principal for an elementary school in the South Bronx. And then was recruited by Republic to found the first elementary charter school in the state, Smilo Collegiate. And so I served as school principal there for 2 years before taking on this role. And in this role, I am overseeing 3 of our charter schools in Jackson, Mississippi. So I'm excited to be here and to continue this talk, to talk a little bit more about the perspective of how the things that are going on now impact education and the way that we see education now. So I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm excited too. And what I love that we all have in common, just one thing, I know we have lots of things in common, but is the education piece. We all are somehow tied to education. So I love that because we know that, and we're going to get into some education components. Of course, this show is about racism in America, but we're going to specifically focus on the workplace and the school community, whether that be students, teachers, faculty, parents, and how racism impacts those communities as well. So before we dive in, I just want you guys to now take turns sharing a little bit about maybe one experience in the workplace that significantly, unfortunately, I know all of us, including me, have had tons of experiences with racism or microaggressions in the workplace, which we'll get into microaggressions in a little bit. But before we do that, if you could speak to one significant experience in your life in the workplace or as an entrepreneur and how that affected you moving forward and what you did with it once it happened. Who wants to start?
I can go first.
All right, go ahead, Charles.
So at the beginning of my teaching career, I was teaching in low-income Title I based schools. And so naturally in the classroom, my students looked like me because of the way that, the culture of poverty exists in this country. And that's where my career began. But then I had an opportunity to move into a school that was located in an affluent area in Nashville. And it was that time that I kind of remembered, not that I had really forgotten, but I kind of remembered what it means to be teaching in a population that doesn't exactly look like me. And got a lot of backlash as a classroom teacher because at the time I was a 5th grade math teacher, and I didn't believe that students learn best from just doing worksheets. And so my classroom was designed a bit different, where we did a lot more discovery-based learning, and folks were having to actually do a lot of thinking and problem-solving work. And that was an adjustment for my fifth graders, and their grades dropped down at first. So they were used to being straight A kids, and some of them dropped down to making Bs in the very beginning of the year. And that made some folks very upset, because they thought that their kid deserved an A. And I said, well, they didn't earn it. And instead of that problem like resting with me, my principal would intervene and would remove kids from my class without talking to me, or giving me any feedback, or reconnecting me with the parents. He just would move them out of my class. But I was very much determined that what I was doing was right for kids. And so stayed the journey and kept my style. The students adjusted and their grades started to reflect what they actually earned. And so they were actually earning A's and earning great grades. And it was a conversation that I never really brought up with my school leader at the time. And it was a part of the reason why I made the decision to exit to move to New York. But that also taught me that like you can't let moments like that slide, and you have to advocate for yourself, because people will constantly like try you. And so it's like I'm the black man on the team who is the aggressive, non-bending one. And instead of like pushing families to think deeper about what I was trying to do, you gave them an out. And so like that was an opportunity that I thought was missed, but also did damage to the way that I saw myself as a Black educator.
Yes. And how is it impacting you right now? Like how is anything shifted for you?
Absolutely. Now it's about using my voice. I work in a school district still, but the difference now is I sit as a senior level executive. And that's a role that I don't take lightly. And I think it's part of my job to advocate for people of color that we serve and that work for our organization, to make sure that our organization is representing ourselves as being anti-racist, being equitable. And we're not there yet, but the team that I work with is very committed to getting us there, which makes me excited about it. But it was a risk to put myself out there to say like, hey, this needs to change. This needs to be different. But I did that because I felt that was the obligation. And I think that's something that as Black leaders, we tend to not just have to think about our own selves, but constantly carry the weight of carrying everyone else along with us in order to make change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Shara, would you like to go next on an experience that you've had?
Sure. And I really appreciated this question because it really made me reflect from my very first paid internship in 2008, again, working on the Obama campaign up and through, now, today's times. And if I can be completely honest, it was hard to pinpoint a situation at work, in a workplace setting, in the work environment where I can say that was just that blatant, outright, in your face experience with racism. And just not to overstep here, but I feel like a lot of people, Black people and people of color, when they get to a certain point, they may experience less of that, right? There's a lot of research and data that goes behind your position and perceived power as a person of color can change your experience when it comes to that direct and blatant and racist experience. But while working, however, in organizing, not in the workplace setting, not at work in an office building, I have experienced it. So of course, Obama, election and campaigning, y'all know what was going on during that time. People were very, very vocal about their dislike for the potential of having a Black president. I walked into yards where people told me to get out, blatantly, we don't welcome you here. And you got to figure I was doing some organizing on the West Coast and the Midwest, and I was in some rural areas. So these are areas as a city girl, born and partially raised in DC and Maryland. Virginia Beach is the furthest south that I ever lived, that, it was a rude awakening of where we are as a country back in 2008. As far as what I've experienced in the workplace, it's always more subtle, which I know that we're going to go into, but there's just clear cues to racism sometimes. Beyond the microaggressions, some things that are not blatantly said. For example, I gave an example on my social media the other day where I said, I'm remembering this one time where this older white lady told me that her dog does not like Black people. in a conversation that was completely unrelated, just a normal conversation, she felt the need to let me know that. And for some reason felt it appropriate to tell me in a one-on-one conversation that her German Shepherd does not like Black people. Then went on to tell me that maybe it's because he's a German Shepherd. And when you think about it, Shara, a lot of German Shepherds are police dogs. And, like Charles, I did not say anything in that moment. I remember being just so confused. I remember actually having a conversation with my father, who I do talk to a lot about issues like these and others. And we kind of joked about it, but then we talked about how, maybe it's a reflection of her own feelings. And that's why she felt the need to say that. And who knows if it's true or not. However, we do see it in those subtle ways, right? So she's not blatantly telling me, I don't like you because you're Black, or I don't like Black people. But my dog doesn't like Black people. And just the fact that she found that appropriate to say. And I feel like, we have these experiences and we don't say anything. And the real impact is that we are always, just in that one example, we are left to kind of think, was that what I think it was? I found like we question ourselves a lot. What was it when it is? But also we kind of doubt our ability to communicate effectively in that moment. Instead of just saying outright, unpack it in that moment, unpack it, see where it's coming from, and just address it head on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you anymore. Piggybacking on what you said about posting the other day, I in fact posted as well an experience I had in the workplace years ago with two white women that definitely were, there were some microaggressions going on. I addressed it, and I was told that I make everything about race. I was told that I'm making a big deal of it. Why is everything you say and everything you point out about race? And I proceeded to say, because unfortunately, it usually is when I am addressing whatever's going on. I know what it looks like. I know what it sounds like. I know what it feels like. Because to your point, you do start to feel like, gosh, is this just me? Am I seeing things, hearing things? Maybe I'm being too sensitive. But luckily, I know you do too as well. I have a strong family and community that, we support each other. And I luckily have been able to navigate how to handle that. But I agree with you. It gets really difficult because after time, and people telling you, why are you bringing this up? You're making it about color. You're playing the race card. You do start to question, should I even say anything?
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Analise?
Yeah, no, never.
God, yeah, wow. How did you accomplish that?
Well, what's really interesting to me is when people actually say they've never experienced it, and or they discount, the small micro. They don't consider microaggressions to be that big of a deal. And they're like, well, it's not stopping me. And it's just interesting though, because it's like, wow, did you put blinders on? Because if they did a microaggression towards you while you're here around this space, what about when they're really intentionally doing it? I don't know. Anyway, it's interesting hearing when people don't feel like they've ever experienced racism. I mean, you're just like, it's so embedded. It is sometimes hard for people to accept that, there was intentionality with these decisions people made that they know have a negative and disproportionate effect on our community. But I think it's scary to believe that, because inherently, I don't think we think in those terms of how can I really destroy an entire community? But some people do, and especially when it comes to money and when it comes to power. And so how do you keep your power? Well, you keep a group down. And you can say, I'm colorblind. Okay. But regardless, you know who it impacts. So I just had to say that. But yeah, I definitely have had instances where especially in education, definitely been upset about how things have gone. And I'll just say one example that was like, man, I really am the only voice. Imagine if I wasn't here to say this. And I was the only Black teacher. I mean, Colorado is 4% Black in general. So that includes anybody who identifies as Black. So as all of us with a Black half or whatever, and so we're already very much a small community and population. But our school system, our public school system, at least in Denver, which employs a lot of individuals in the city, it's 90,000 kids. That's a whole town. Like, that's my hometown of kids. And so for me, it's just like they're running an entire city, but our population of students is actually 70 something percent. Student of color, Black students are about 14% in Denver public schools, at least. And our teaching population is the opposite, which is 70% white female teachers and white teachers. And so that's just a huge difference, where I have friends who grew up in the South and they're like, all my teachers were Black. I'm like, wow, that must have been nice. Or that's just like interesting. Well, so I go back to being the only teacher who identified as Black at all in the building. And there was 2 schools actually in an entire building, 2 schools, and I was the only Black teacher. Everybody else was like a server or, support staff jobs. So when there was a survey that went out that all the students were mandated to take, and it was coming from students. So this is where, for me, it's like they hide under a guise of even student voice. Let student voice go. And they're protecting our vulnerable population. School participated in a challenge that was citywide, and they wanted to address racial disparities in the city, in DPS in particular, but they wanted to get an idea of what the experiences were of students at the school. Now, I come from a sociology background, and so I'm a big supporter of making sure you protect vulnerable communities when you're even doing surveys. That's why we just push out surveys, take this, support my kid. I'm like, whoa, you have to get approval. IRB is there for a reason. And anyway, the questions on the survey I took a look at, and on the top, it looked okay. From an overview glance, it looked okay, but there were certain identifying questions where the school is an anomaly, only had 1 Black male who I knew who was a freshman, and the school was no more than 200 kids at all. So I knew if you make a student list their grade level, their gender, and then how old they are, their ethnicity or race, you then know who had this response. And so it's no longer safe for that student to share freely their experience, especially talking about racial experiences in that school. I was like, the backlash is going to be clear. Like, they're going to either be hyper engaged with this student instead of looking at the other factors in this and only talk to him, when really it's the other kids you need to really talk to. I'm giving context because when I brought that up, I asked one question. I said, is there a reason we need all of these identifiers? Because I didn't know how to address it. Well, fast forward, I knew how to address it, but I didn't know how deep was I going to go in this fight for making sure I'm protecting the 1 Black boy that I knew, and I knew his mom. So I was like, I don't want to get this parent involved. So that's in the back of my head, but I bring it up, and there's a white female teacher who was like their facilitator for this program. She was immediately offended. I get called into a conversation, and then you know what they did? This is an interesting habit that people have. Oh, let's bring in the Black others to talk to this other Black person. Instead of me talking to the adult facilitator, inquiring, hey, how come this survey has certain questions? They made me talk to the kids. And then there was 2 Black girls who were running it. And so then I look like I'm going up against my own students, and I'm like, hey, I know y'all don't know me because it was my first year and they were in love with this white female English teacher. She had a black husband. I'm mentioning those things for a reason because she believed she was more insightful than I was and never liked me. But anyway, back to that, I felt really disrespected that when I was talking to adults, they sent in kids. So you're going to question our survey? Talk to the kids about it, huh? Instead of being actual adults about it. And I also know that same teacher from then on, I would have to pass her classroom and her best friend's classroom every single day to get to my class. They never spoke to me, never said hi. Not one day did they say hi. And for me, that is an experience of isolation, that I'm the only Black teacher. You have literally had issue with me because all the Black kids end up in my room. They don't have my class. They trying to check in. They just liked my energy and the resources I had in the room. But to know that those two things existed, and honestly, I had to prove myself, not even like be trusted. I had to prove why this was an issue instead of them just taking a look at what I actually said as a valid point. So I got to prove that I have a sociology background, students. I got a master's too, but like that didn't matter anyway. So I was very disappointed at how things were handled. And then of course the repercussions were that then no one wanted to talk to me because they felt like I would just question everything they did. But I also was like, you got to look at what students are pushing out, and to require and mandate every student anyway. I did have a ton of issues with it because let me have asked them to take a survey, it wouldn't have been supported either. So I'm like, when you speak up, it's just very scary in the educational setting on how long are you going to end up staying, because either they accept your advice and don't see you as a threat, but see you as building on the foundation of their school, or they're going to get rid of you or make you feel so isolated that you just don't even want to continue working in those spaces. And I was a special education teacher anyway, so I always had to push in and question, like, is there a reason this hasn't been done? Or can you explain to me what this assignment's supposed to? No one likes that type of educator, but I just can't help it. I don't know how else to ask you, but to ask. So anyway, that's definitely been an experience that angered me, because two things happened. You didn't have foresight to consider and protect our vulnerable kids. And then two, you got mad at the only Black teacher who happened to bring it up, and then isolated her the rest of the year, or isolated me the rest of the year. So little long-winded.
Let me ask you about, well, thank you for sharing. And let me ask you about some solutions to that, because I know I have my own thoughts and ideas about how we can progress forward in our school systems as far as how to minimize those type of experiences and actually actions, really, because it starts, as you said, like with the survey. It started with whoever created that survey. Obviously, they did not have the wherewithal or did not care, I can't assume, to address, no matter what color they were, white, Black, Latino, whatever. But even if it was an all white, because that is going to happen. We're going to have all white school systems or all white teachers. Or how do we address getting past that or working through that with other white educators so that those type of things are, I guess, on the forefront of their mind, and they strategically write things that work for everyone? Charles, Shara, do you guys have any solutions to that?
Well, it has everything to do with seats at the table, right? And so, the executive team at my network consists of 8 people. 3 of those people are people. 4 of those people are people of color. And so you got to have the perspective there to even make it. And the other part is hard to regulate because it's about accepting feedback. And internalizing it, right? And I think as employees, we get feedback all the time about the way that we show up and what we're doing at work. And in education, feedback is like one of the first things you're going to get. Like, people are always going to tell you how you're doing, what you're doing, and what they want to see. And that has to be a conversation that's reciprocal. And especially because the disadvantage is you're lacking perspective. And if you're lacking perspective, the only way to clear it up is to get it. And so one of my biggest pushes around is like, you've got to open up your mind to get feedback, to know that you're not always right. And that whole feeling of like always rightness is something that I've always had to battle against, because like imposter syndrome is real. And it's something that I have battled with as I've made progression up at the ranks in this work, where I'm like, ooh, do I actually belong? Am I smart enough to be at the table? And it's because of the opportunity where you speak up and people shut you down or they don't listen to your voice. And so I think that's really important. But the only way to have Black people sitting at these kind of seats and positions is to not lock Black educators into being culture people or to just be focused on DEI or just in SPED. We have to be more well-rounded. And so what you see is that a lot of schools, the deans of culture, so the people who deal with discipline, are Black folks. And when you want to go out to become a principal, when you go to sit down and interview, they're asking you about how did you make academic change? So if you've only been the one giving out suspensions and detentions and all of those other things, how are you even competitive as a candidate for an administrator of a school? And like my experience as an administrator is what allows me to get into this role, is that I've served as a principal before. I've been able to get results in the school building. I've been able to lead the team, been able to coach and develop leaders. I know academics really well. I know culture really well. I know SPED really well. And so when I go to sit down for the interview, I am prepared. But my colleagues who have been pigeonholed into these culture roles just because they know how to do classroom management, it stifles us.
I agree. And I agree with you, Charles, about a seat at the table. However, like I said, going back to, and I'm pushing this because, again, like in communities like Denver, as me and Analise knows, and as she spoke to, again, 4% Black in our schools, though, then you go into Denver public schools and there's 70% Black, sometimes 90% Latino, but you may have, like she said, the opposite of teachers. So I feel like until we get that shift, which supposedly is being worked on, that's another story. I'm not going to digress into that on whether really that is being promoted and recruited. But until that shift happens, I think we still need to speak to our white colleagues and white people in the community. And that's a part of today, too, because Black folks know that, they know the deal. They know a lot of the solutions. But to speak to white people on, if you are one of these teachers, if you are one of these colleagues and principals, what do they need to be aware of as they're thinking through, surveys and curriculum and talking? I know that's a very broad question, but I'm trying to, get us to get some solutions to our white colleagues on how can we address this with them and have these candid conversations.
I hate to hog this space, but I definitely have a response.
Yes, please do. Please.
I have a couple of monumental moments in my career that have helped me move to this place. I tell people all the time that I've gotten to this seat, but the trauma that I've experienced to get here is crazy. But there have been a couple of people who've been really instrumental. And there was one I actually had two managers when I was a teacher in Jersey. And when I took the job in Jersey, I told the principal, he was a white man, I said, listen, I moved here because I want to be an administrator. I think that I am on the pathway to getting it right. This is what I need. So if I'm going to come work for you, this is what I need. So I was really vocal about that. But the other part was the making of space. So my manager at the time knew that was my aspiration, and she intentionally designed development so that I can make progress towards being a leader. And so I think, for white colleagues, especially those in power, recognizing and sifting out talent, even if it doesn't exist, if somebody mentions that this is an aspiration, help them move toward it. It may not be in a year, it may not be in the 2, it may not even be in 5, but the intentional act of saying, I see you, and I can support you to move in that direction makes all the difference. And so a year later, I did become an assistant principal. And I got to talk about how that leader was able to pour in the skills for me to move over into that. So I think it's about like a part of this dismantling has to do with like ceding power in places that are necessary and just being self-aware. If I am white in a school district that is majority African-American or Latino, and the majority of the faces I'm looking at look white and in opposition to what your school looks like, then that's a moment of like awareness and saying, I have something I can do about it. So even if I'm not the leader, I can prop somebody up and give them shout outs to be like, hey, I popped into Charles's classroom today. You should have seen that math lesson, how engaged kids were during that time period. Like, go check him out. Like, it's just making us be more visible in the things that we're shining at to help us get that recognition.
I completely agree. Couldn't agree with you more. I'm going to shift a little bit into just workspaces in general. Even if you're out in the field like I am, I'm an independent consultant in all things I do. So I'm working at home, at Starbucks, in the office. I'm all over the place. And so, of course, in the community, you have to integrate and, you have to interact with all types of different people and come from different spaces and places. And I think I want to add to your point on those white people in those spaces speaking up, and without, I must say, a but, because, respectfully, I say, please be quiet and just listen, because as Analise went in her story, I'm hearing the theme, right? We all know the theme is that it's not, most of the time people of color don't feel safe to speak up. When they do speak up, they get suppressed. And then that suppression leads to all kinds of things, a vicious cycle of either they go and, they're excluded, like Analise said, or maybe they're fired, or maybe they're, all kinds of different things happen. So I think for me, what I encourage, white folks to do in all of our communities is to just listen and let Black folks have their space to say what they need to say and talk it through, instead of just always saying, oh, that didn't happen, or like Analise said, bringing in someone else. I think it's really important, because I just heard I have a friend that is in the community. He works at University of Denver, and he said, basically, I won't go into the story, but the same thing. This is real time with all this going on. This just happened to him last week at the University of Denver, and I hope to get him on here to speak to that. And they brought in a whole bunch of different people to talk with him and analyze it. And these are people who have communication degrees. Okay, let that sink in. And they were still bringing outsiders in when this man of position and power and brilliance was questioned for when he addressed, something in the workplace that was racist. So,
I definitely can, as I had begun transitioning out of the public school system, which my body literally got sick. I was not calibrated. I was working with students and their LRE, which is least restrictive environment, suddenly became 100% me. And it was total violations against the law. It was very hard to deal with it. And then also I absorbed all their energy. So I had to leave. I was just not in a good space. But as I began to transition out of education, I started seeing certain things and experiencing things in a different way. And there was an nonprofit entity and work done organization that I've been doing work with, that I had a really difficult time with a particular white woman who is in charge of an organization and nonprofit. And I know, to me, that's a workplace tension too. A lot of nonprofits are definitely getting a lot of money from Black poverty and have white representation, and will have frontline Black people up until the higher parts of it and more, the salaried position, so to speak. Well, this was a community space, and this white woman literally questioned everything I did. And I talked to my boss, and he's white. He knew her. He was like, no, I don't think she meant that. It happened again a month later, just really specifically addressing anything I said. someone could seriously say the same thing. Even another Black person, there was elder Black women part of the group, and they would say it or repeat that they liked it. She would maybe consider it. Well, one of the things that I found out was my boss was not going to address it in a way that would actually make me comfortable in this nonprofit community organization space. So much so, he told me, well, I think you should have a conversation with her. And I was like, the person who's violated consistently has to put the onus on themselves to address again when it's happened multiple times. And then almost 8 months later, I stayed in a position, and then she blew up and like cursed me out in front of everybody. Now, I don't take kindly to being cussed out, and I usually have a lot of words to prepare to go back to that person. But I was like, okay, what? I was turning red with anger, and I'm light, so yeah, I was turning red. But I was so angry. I was like, I really wanted to act a fool, but I was like, there's a greater purpose. Well, lo and behold, my boss at that moment finally said something to this woman, and she was like still cussing, older. She's like 70, old white woman, got a Black female partner. Like, you would think that she would just be different, and she was not. And turns out, though, she was holding a grudge against me because she thought I was affiliated with some very, like, she thought I was one of the women. What sick is this? There was some sexual harassment charges against an individual of a different nonprofit. Some people in the city supported him, and some supported the 4 Black women who put the allegations, who filed the charge, came forward. How are you split? 4 Black women say this is their experience, and you're still confused? So it turned out that she was holding a grudge against me because she thought that I was the one who came forward when it wasn't even me. I had just started like a month in, and then lost my job 3 months later because they didn't have no more money because nobody trusted. Every other entity respected the Black women's voices except the ones in it. And so I was just like, that had happened 2 years, a year and a half prior to me getting this position. And that old white lady got to cuss me out, be disrespectful, and no one checked her. No one checked her. And even my Black colleagues and peers. And I'm like, man, white people get into our spaces, and that's where it's like the taking up space. They even come in ours knowing what they have and do. I got a research background. I'm this. You know who my partner is. And like it's cred that you got a Black partner. That's not it. But anyway, I was definitely hurt, but recognize, wow, the nonprofit entity is pretty bad as well, almost even worse, because they get money, like specifically get money. Teachers be broke, so I'm like, I don't know why we beefing, but it was such an outrageous experience. I had to BCC the email that my boss sent all that information on. He's the one who confirmed it. I was like, why would he email this? Send. I was like, this is crazy. It was a horrible experience, and I just was like really offended that we continue, even in Black spaces, to allow white voice to control and demand certain things that they never really would do for me on the flip. So I don't know.
Analise, if I could jump in, what I think what stands out to me, and I haven't heard from Shara, so I'm gonna go back to her in here in a second. What stands out to me is a theme that I'm hearing from all of us is when we use our voice, everybody says, you don't really have a voice, let's suppress it. So again, for me, I want to talk about those solutions. And excuse me, it's important that we share these stories so we can go to those solutions. Shara, do you want to chime in while I take a drink?
I think I love both of those stories. Both of you come from the educational background. As someone who transitioned from all Black community and all Black school system as a child, growing up in DC when it was Chocolate City, y'all know now it's kind of Vanilla Beanie, or I don't know, another flavor, I don't know. However, went from Chocolate City school system to Virginia Beach, which is very diverse but still majority white, and having seen some things, and having my dad tell me when I got older that he experienced one of my advanced classes teachers telling him to pull me out because I can't handle the class. So listening to administrators and educators of our students, telling the back end of the story, we know that exists. As far as from the work side of things, going back to what we said as far as solutions, you have to call it out. I think a lot of times we are afraid to call it out, especially, Black women, because we're going to be the angry Black woman. There's been times where I've been asked, why am I getting so upset? But when Karen or Becky responds in the same way, they don't get called angry, or they're not mad. It's I'm mad. If I don't respond to a microaggression, if we can just say microaggression, and it's written all over my face in the meeting that I'm upset about something that you just said about me or something that you just did, then it's, Shara, why are you so quiet? Why do you have an attitude? It's damned if you do or damned if you don't. So you know what? We're going to damned and we're going to do. And we're going to speak up and we're going to call it out and we're going to call it what it is. There is some skill in that, right? So we can't always be angry. My middle name is Shanice, and sometimes I get angry and I go directly to Shanice mode. I hop, skip, and jump over Shar, and I go to Shanice, okay? And we can't always do that. We have to have some skill behind it. So, part of the thing that I do is breathe. First and foremost, as a person who meditates, breathing does a lot for your body. And, Analise, you talked about how when you experience those racist moments, how it really drains your body, because it does have a physical effect on us as Black people. We go home with it. We can't sleep. We're thinking about it. We can't eat. It affects us. So breathe. When you're in that moment, first thing first, don't think about whether it is or whether it's not. We know what it is. Breathe. One thing I learned is always ask the question. What do you mean by that? Give that person an opportunity to explain. We know that sometimes it's going to be a flat out lie. They're going to trip over their words, but you're calling it, you're turning it around back on them. When you said
that's nice. That's nice.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
And
I'm gonna give you a chance to lie. No.
You're starting that way. Of course, if it continues on, we know Shanice is going to come out and it's going to get really real quick. But in the beginning, we're going to have a conversation. What do you mean when you said this? And some people feel like, now that a lot is coming up and out in the current climate, I don't even think it's inappropriate to bring up something that you may have experienced last year. And I know, Jessica, that you have experience with teaching implicit bias, and as well as I as a trainer. And something that we teach people is something called the SBI model, which is how to have the conversation. How do you construct a conversation? You talk about the situation, you talked about the behavior, and you talked about the impact on you. So even if you're not directly talking about it in the immediate moment, you're talking about something that happened previously, thinking about what you said, Charles, is bigger than me in that moment. I'm establishing change. We're changing the culture, and changing the entire culture of a school system, of your workplace, of how people treat you in your business and your entrepreneur endeavors. That is going to take calling out in the media, but also talking about past transgressions. When you did this back on April 2005, this was the behavior that you did, and this is how I got receipts, and this is how it impacted me. And this is how I suggest you move forward. And I also agree that we do need to have more seats at the table. I am the type of person, my dad is always asking me, why do I not hold some type of management position or directorship position? You have all the qualifications, etc. Truth be told, I have no interest. And it's because I don't want to deal with the BS that I know that our people often have to deal with more so than our counterparts in those positions. However, even in this conversation and with everything that's going on now, I'm starting to feel like I have an obligation to. And I think that more of us with our qualifications, I have a master's degree and y'all, everything and our experience, it gets to the point where we have an obligation to walk into those roles, even if we don't feel like, I don't want to deal with it, in order to establish a path for people that's coming behind us. So for instance, I may, want to go into management so that I can have that small little space of my own to create change. And it's not going to just happen with one person, as you know, Charles, but you've created changes that's going to affect people who come behind you and you hand the baton off to. So I do think that we do have to put ourselves in position, right? That whole concept, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Get ready so that you can put yourself in position to not only help you and yourself and be like self-serving, but help the generations that are coming behind us.
You said a mouthful there.
I do like that. I like that. And I'm thinking about what Jess said regarding solutions, especially for white folks who actually are interested in checking their behaviors. I think that you reminded me, breathe, because I get crunk and I get hyped and I get upset and I don't like injustice and I don't like that stuff. I don't like to deal with people who aren't right. I'm like, you got to get right before you come to me because I can't change you, boo. You got to fix it. But I think that another thing is how you were saying they kind of push you like, oh, you're quiet. What's wrong? They know you mad. But I think if they really want some change, to be okay being uncomfortable as well. So like, just because you tried 2 times to talk to me, I've got stuff compacted now that I really am not trying to be vulnerable again in this space with you, or y'all saw me blow up and now I'm embarrassed, or like can clearly tell you didn't really care the first time. So maybe you thought about some stuff I said, but maybe I would say to my friends, and other folks, who are interested, being okay, being uncomfortable, because it's not going to be a quick change. And you can't expect me to like, be, oh my God, I'm so happy that you care about me. I'm like, bro, you got to, like, even the protests right now, I'm like, oh, in a week, y'all changed? Oh, okay. And trust this. So I had to watch and I had to look for consistency and also effectiveness, because that's what I'm going to need to see before I engage anymore. So,
and one thing I want to say on that before moving on is that also in those interactions, knowing that, if somebody keeps pushing you to talk, you don't have to talk. A lot of when it comes to social interaction when in this space is power dynamics. Because you keep on trying to push me to say what's wrong with me, I'm not obligated to. My voice is my voice. And, the bigger picture, like what's underlying is us having ownership over our voice. You're not going to tell me how I feel. You're not going to tell me I'm an angry Black woman. You're also not going to tell me that what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling is not right or correct. I am the owner of that. Period.
And if I could add, Shara, I think that goes for not even just the works, but I'm just thinking here, not schools, workplace, even family. Because if you can't tell, I'm of mixed heritage, and that goes into family stuff and friends, or just even if you're not mixed and you just have, a variety of different friends across all, cultures and spaces and colors, is that, a lot of, I've noticed, going back to what Analise is saying right now, a lot of folks want to talk about it and reach out and everything, and that's okay. And I think that's good, but I can't speak for anyone else, but I know me personally, I have responded, and I'm not a type to ignore, but I need my space and time too, because I was ready to talk about this, and I'm not resentful or mad. It's not coming from a space of that, but I've been ready to talk about it. I've been talking about it for years. Analise knows. So for me, it's like, okay, I'm not even mad, but now y'all want to come and in my space and bombard me. And I love anyone watching, please, I love y'all. So I don't want them to think that this is a jab at them. It's not. I'm just being candid and honest that, we need time to process even what's going on right now. And it takes, I'm not going to be able to necessarily respond to you right when you need that response, because I've been doing this my whole life. I feel, I've been talking the talk, walking the walk, and now, folks are starting to see it and want a dialogue, and that will happen. I'm not going to ignore that, but I guess that's what I want to point out is, Shara, I appreciate you saying that sometimes we need space and time for things, and we don't have to feel, because at first I was getting bombarded with emails, calls, texts, and I'm feeling like, oh, I got to answer. And it was overload. It still is overload. I'm still processing everything. So we have to, I think, be considerate of each other. I mean, we've all gone through that, maybe not with race relations, right? But where, someone is trying to get a point across to you for years, and then all of a sudden you have an awakening, and then you go talk to them. And so, I just want to tell folks too that, especially non-Black people, is that give people time and space. It's okay to reach out to them. And in my opinion, it lets people know you love them, because when people are reaching out to me right now, I know they care. I'm on their mind. They love me, but I also need that space and time And it's a process, as to you guys' point.
I was going to add in, I have 2 points. Hopefully I remember both of them by the time I finish the first one. But this idea of comfort is always funny to me because, like, as people of color, like, comfort is a luxury. It's not something that we get to luxuriate in very often. And I think this is the time where I just, especially working in school districts, right, where folks are working, and then with the way public school is going, like, public schools are serving mostly people of color, no matter where you go. And so it's always interesting to see folks push back on reform work in education, because I'm like, truly, you're pushing back on our community. So let's start there. But, like, discomfort in working in Black and brown spaces is just not okay. Like, you don't have the room to be uncomfortable because your job literally impacts the future of Black and brown kids that are growing up and getting an education. And so it's not just like, oh, like, I had this incident or I have these thoughts and they affect me. It's like, no, you're impacting kids. Like, how does your bias, how does your misconception about, people of color, how does that impact the kids that you recommend for SPED services? How does that impact the kids that are suspended from school? How does it impact reading achievement? How does it impact math achievement? Like, they matter and they have influence. So it's like, you can't be uncomfortable because your work matters too much for it. And so I think, a lot of programs like TFA and, do a lot of work to get folks into the classroom. But I think all school systems now have to do a deeper work of, like, their application and interviewing processes to really get at mindsets that folks have around kids, and what they believe in kids and what they don't believe in kids, and using that more as a guide to help navigate employing people that are here for the work. And I think once you start getting like-minded folks together who are driving in the same direction, more and more people who feel like that want to join in. Teacher certification and teacher shortage is a huge issue. And so I think if people are looking for things to do, I think it's like, even if you don't have kids, it is, let me get informed about the things that are going on in schools from people who run them so that I understand when I go to vote, what my vote needs to look like. We need people voting in local elections, voting for school board members. We need people voting and having their voice heard in budget conversations. Hell, if you don't even vote in a local election, please make it to a budget meeting. That's where they're doing things like defunding education. They're talking about it with the police, but educators know that defunding education has been a thing. It's been a thing, and it continues to be a thing. And even with this current pandemic, we're talking about school districts losing 10 to 15% of their budgets. We're talking staff members. We're talking academic programming. It has a lot of impact. But then we usually don't see that made up anywhere. So nobody's like, oh, we took money out of education, we'll put it back. No, as we took it out, we're going to keep it out. And you all just have to figure out how to be excellent anyway. And so I think that's my 2 pieces of advice is, like, lean into discomfort, get out of your own way, stop being uncomfortable, and lean in. Read, talk to people, treat this like you would treat any other issue that you see as problematic, and lean in there. And then vote where it matters. Presidential elections aren't the only one. So figuring out how you can use your vote to further the causes of programs like education to push them in forward direction.
Both excellent points, Charles. Excellent. And going back to what you were talking about, the discomfort, and going back to what Shara says, it all links into implicit bias, in my opinion, because implicit bias, you may not be racist, but at the very least, you're implicitly biased. And we all have implicit biases that we have to unpack and be aware of. And that's a whole nother conversation that I love. That's my wheelhouse. But if anyone is interested, definitely reach out to Shara or myself. She's in the DC area. I'm in Denver because we both teach implicit bias or facilitate. I mean, I'm a learner too. So I don't even like to call it teaching. It's more facilitating conversations. So my forums include unpacking all of that, talking about microaggressions, and again, next steps, because some folks think, oh, I've noticed my implicit bias and it stops there. And I want to encourage people to go beyond that. The first step is awareness, is being constantly reminded of, did I did I assume something about that person that I don't even know? And getting to know people, just like on this stage, this platform, conversations and getting to know people is a perfect first step, because once you start to see a person as a person, it really does change the way you view them. A lot of times at first glance, your bias kicks in, but just even having a quick conversation with them can shift some things.
I'd also add a little nugget there around this, like the like loving me and caring for me is great, and I'm not going to shut it down, but it's not enough, right? Like I don't want to just like you to be like, oh, well, I love everybody. I'm like, that's great. But what we're dealing with is larger than love, is larger than hate. It is that is embedded within systems. And so it's like the real work goes in how do you help dismantle systems to create systems that are more equitable. And it has that whole idea around ceding power, which, Black folks have done since our existence. Our power was given away from us. So at this time, it's time for there to be some reckoning. And I think that's where it comes in.
I agree. And to your point, Charles, I encourage anyone out there that if it is people you love, address it with them. And sometimes you need to separate yourself. I have done that personally, so I've practiced what I preach. There's people in my life I love, but that love wasn't enough currently to take us to that next place in our relationship. So sometimes at least for myself, for my own well-being, I needed to step away and unplug from them because they weren't ready to embrace these conversations.
And to the point of thinking of what we can do and, not always feeling like we want to talk about it. We are reclaiming our time, and sometimes reclaiming our time meaning us just being quiet and not saying nothing. Let y'all figure it out. Let y'all watch them documentaries that Amazon got up for y'all. Netflix done got y'all a whole category now. Y'all going to learn. And it don't necessarily have to be us teaching y'all. But, it's a quote that says the most revolutionary act that a Black person can do is be their authentic selves. And I think in the meanwhile, that's what we can do more of. Let's stop the code switching. Let's practice, like in all of our spaces, whether it's at school or when we're doing business with folks or just white colleagues and workspaces. Practice being your most authentic self as much as possible. And that in itself is a revolutionary act in these days and times.
Excellent. Well, I know we're almost out of time. Is there any final thoughts from anybody? And you know what? I am so sorry for our listeners because normally I'm more engaged, but we were covering so much, but I was watching everybody's comments. I've been liking and loving some. Shout out to everybody who's been listening. Jasmine, Tor, Shannon, Ashley, Carmen. We had so many people, and I have to go back to the dog comment. By the way, Shara, everybody agreed that she taught her dog to be racist. Thank you very much. That's what everybody's comments were. And I didn't jump in and say it, but I was thinking the same thing. So everybody was just giving love today and commenting and saying they've had these experiences as well. So we really appreciate. Oh, and Tor does say schools should hire DEI leaders to help move in these spaces. So that was a comment. So I just really appreciate everyone tuning in, and please share this with others because, as you know or don't know, with Facebook Live, it's going to be on my page from this point on. You can share it, you can view it. It will be on Jessica Springs. It's not with the agent on YouTube. So after this show, I always get it edited, uploaded, and it will be at Jessica Springs YouTube. So we've got all the Takeover Tuesdays there. Check them out. And I just hope that we can all continue to dialogue when we need to. Like Shara said, be quiet when we need to too. And see some real progress here. But again, I think it starts with solutions, not just conversations. Those are first step.
Well, Jess, I wanted to say thank you. And I know that we're looking in education primarily, but for me, knowing, your work in real estate, it's important as well because a lot of decisions on where people move is based on whether or not their families and kids have a place that they'll feel accepted or challenged or what the school's ratings are. And so it's definitely an important conversation to have and show that connection that how vital it is for us to take in consideration, like, my kid needs to thrive. And so how are you doing that as a school leader? So I just see that connection very clearly, and really being important.
I mean, it's, as we know, it affects every space, and we know we can't cover it all. I'd love to. And it's almost like you need a different panel for each space: the living, working, playing, all of it, which is unfortunate, but it's needed, because it's too bad we even have to do this. Like, we shouldn't have to break down, well, being Black in a neighborhood, being Black in play, being Black, but unfortunately that's where we're at. And we're, of course, because we see what's happening still, even as we speak. I will say, I just want to make one final note. I think as Black people too, we need to support each other, like for real, not like surface level support, not, yeah, girl, I'll text you, or no, I mean, like groups that are committed and organized to supporting each other when things go down in the workplace or in the workspace. We need organized groups that can call and lean on each other to have each other's backs. And that's a whole nother, because I have ideas on that. We'll have to bring us all back. And that comes with financial freedom. Gosh, we're going on what Analise said, because that goes into real estate, because once you have financial freedom, we can support each other more. But if I just say that, we need to stick together for sure. And I see that, but not enough. This is not, I'm about to bash Black people right now, but I will say, we have to do authentic support. Many times we feel isolated, and we continue the isolation with each other. And we have to really, wrap our arms in an organized front with obviously a strategic plan to support. If Analise is going through something at work, she needs to be able to call me and whoever else is in our team, even if this is a community team, doesn't even have to be anything official. But I really believe we've got to start doing that. We've got to start having groups of us that strategically move and operate to protect each other when these things happen.
Completely agree.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. This was impactful. I knew it would be. I picked you all for a purpose, and you're here for a purpose. And I know you walk in your purpose, and so I just knew you'd have a lot to bring to the table. And I appreciate you and your seat at the table today. Speaking of seats, so thank you, Shara. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Analise. For those of you still that hanging on for us, I know this is a longer conversation than usual, but there's just so many layers, right? I love you. Thank you for tuning in every week to my regulars. And all I can say is stay inspired, keep talking, and keep doing the work. Until next week, this is Takeover Tuesdays. See you next time.